In 1974, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia that secretly became the foundation of American power. Not military bases, not technology, not even diplomacy. It was a handshake that said, "Sell your oil in dollars and we'll protect your kingdom forever." That single deal let America print money without consequence for 50 years. Every war funded on credit, every bailout, every stimulus check. All of it was possible because the world had to buy dollars just to fill their gas tanks. But here's what should terrify you. Saudi Arabia is now selling oil to China in yuan. They've applied to join BRICS. They're building relationships with nations that openly want to destroy dollar dominance. Petrodollar is dying, and if this deal collapses, the ripple effects won't just hit Wall Street. They'll hit your grocery store, your savings account, your retirement. The clock is ticking, and almost nobody in the mainstream media is telling you what comes next. Today, we follow the money, from Riyadh to Beijing, from 1974 to right now. And what we find will change how you see everything. The 1974 Let's go back to where this all started. 1971. Richard Nixon takes the dollar off the gold standard. Overnight, the greenback has nothing backing it. No gold, no silver, just trust. And trust in a government that just lost Vietnam wasn't exactly abundant. The dollar was in freefall. Inflation was surging. America needed a new anchor. Enter Henry Kissinger. In 1974, Kissinger flew to Riyadh and struck a deal with King Faisal that would reshape the global order. The terms were simple but devastating in their implications. Saudi Arabia would price all of its oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, the United States would provide military protection and weapons. The petrodollar system was never about oil. It was about creating artificial demand for a currency that had nothing else backing it. Think about that. Every country on Earth that needed oil, which is every country, now needed dollars first. Japan, Germany, Brazil, India. Didn't matter. You want oil, buy dollars. This created a permanent global demand for the US currency, a demand that had nothing to do with American productivity or innovation. It was manufactured, engineered, and it worked beautifully, for America at least. But what happens when the engineer loses control of the machine? Printing privilege. Here's what the petrodollar actually gave America, and it's more powerful than any weapon ever built. It gave the United States the ability to print money and export the inflation to everyone else. When the Federal Reserve creates dollars out of thin air, normally that would crash the currency. Supply goes up, value goes down. Basic economics. But when every nation on Earth is forced to hold dollars as reserves, that excess money gets absorbed globally. Absorbed. America prints, the world pays. The national debt hits $34 trillion and climbing, no problem, because countries like Japan, China, and Saudi Arabia keep buying US Treasury bonds. They have to. They need dollars for oil. Print, spend, repeat. This is why America can run endless deficits, fund wars on credit, and bail out banks without the dollar collapsing the way the Venezuelan bolivar or the Argentine peso did. It's not because America is more responsible with money. It is because the world has no choice but to subsidize American spending. The petrodollar isn't just a trade agreement. It's the invisible engine behind American hegemony. And someone just put sugar in the gas tank. But this leads us to something even more disturbing. China's move. In March 2023, something happened that should have been front-page news everywhere. Saudi Arabia announced it was open to selling oil in currencies other than the US dollar. Not a rumor, not speculation. The Saudi finance minister said it publicly, and the first customer, China. Beijing has been preparing for this moment for over a decade. They built the Shanghai Petroleum Exchange specifically to trade oil in yuan. They created digital currency infrastructure. They cultivated relationships across the Middle East while Washington was busy with internal politics. In December 2022, Xi Jinping flew to Riyadh for a historic summit, not with just Saudi Arabia, but with the entire Gulf Cooperation Council. The message was clear. China is the world's largest oil importer. Saudi Arabia is the world's largest oil exporter. Why do they need a middleman currency from a country 10,000 miles away? If you're seeing the pattern here, good. Hit like and subscribe. to keep exposing what they hide. Because what comes next connects all the dots. Yuan for oil. The first cracks in the petrodollar aren't coming. They're already here, and Beijing is swinging the hammer. But the question is, why would Saudi Arabia risk angering its oldest protector? Saudi betrayal. To understand why Saudi Arabia is hedging its bets, you need to understand what's changed. For 50 years, the deal was simple. Saudi oil in dollars, American military protection. Both sides benefited, but the relationship has been deteriorating for over a decade. The Obama administration's Iran nuclear deal infuriated Riyadh. The Biden administration called Saudi Arabia a pariah state during the campaign. When Mohammed bin Salman requested more military support, Washington hesitated. When you tell your most important ally they're a pariah, don't be surprised when they start looking for new friends. And MBS found plenty. China offered weapons sales with no human rights lectures attached. Russia coordinated oil production through OPEC+. India became a massive new customer. Nations have no permanent friends or allies. They only have permanent interests. Saudi Arabia's permanent interest is survival and profit. If China is buying 25% of their oil and America is producing its own through shale, the math changes. The kingdom is diversifying its alliances the same way smart investors diversify portfolios. This isn't betrayal, it's business. And the biggest business move is still coming because Saudi Arabia didn't just pivot to China. They joined something much bigger, the BRICS threat. In August 2023, Saudi Arabia was invited to join BRICS. Let that sink in. The nation that built the petrodollar system is now joining an alliance whose explicit goal is to reduce global dependence on the US dollar. BRICS originally stood for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now it's expanding. Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Together, these nations represent over 40% of the global population and over a quarter of global GDP. 1. BRICS nations control 42% of global oil. 2. They represent 46% of the world population. 3. Combined GDP rivals the G7. 4. They're building alternative payment systems. This isn't some fringe movement. This is a coordinated restructuring of global financial power. And at the center of it is a simple idea: de-dollarize. Russia already sells oil to China in yuan and rubles. India buys Russian oil in rupees. Brazil and China trade in their own currencies. The BRICS New Development Bank offers loans without IMF conditions. New World Order. Each transaction that bypasses the dollar is a small crack. And Saudi Arabia joining BRICS isn't a crack, it's a sledgehammer. But what does this actually mean for your wallet? Dollar dominance. Right now, about 58% of global reserves are held in US dollars. That's down from 71% in 2000. Slowly, quietly, the world is already moving away from the dollar. But the petrodollar is the last pillar holding up the whole structure. When the oil trade leaves the dollar loses its reason to exist as a reserve currency. Here's what that means in practice. If countries no longer need dollars to buy oil, they no longer need to hold massive dollar reserves. If they don't hold reserves, they start buying US Treasury bonds. If they start buying treasuries, America can no longer fund its debt cheaply. And if America can't fund its debt, interest rates explode. Your mortgage goes up. Car loans become unaffordable. Credit card rates double. The stock market crashes because cheap money was the only thing keeping it inflated. The entire American standard of living is subsidized by petrodollar demand. That's not conspiracy, that's accounting. Former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan admitted it. Cheap debt ends. The privilege of printing without consequence disappears the moment the world finds an alternative. And they're building one right now. Speaking of which, there's a weapon America has been using to fight back, and it's backfiring spectacularly. Sanctions backfire. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the United States and its allies unleashed the most aggressive sanctions campaign in history. They froze $300 billion of Russian central bank reserves. They kicked Russian banks off the SWIFT payment network. They thought it would cripple Moscow in weeks. Instead, it sent a message to every nation on Earth. Your money is not safe. if Washington decides you're the enemy. Saudi Arabia watched, China watched, India watched, Brazil watched. Every country that holds dollars in reserve suddenly realized those dollars could be frozen, seized, or rendered useless with a single executive order. When you weaponize the dollar, you give everyone else a reason to find an alternative. And that's exactly what happened. Russia shifted to yuan and rupee trade. China accelerated its digital yuan rollout. The BRICS nations doubled down on building alternative payment systems. Weapon turned boomerang. The irony is devastating. By using the dollar as a weapon, America proved that the dollar couldn't be trusted as a neutral reserve currency. Every sanction against Russia was also an advertisement for de-dollarization. America weaponized its greatest asset and turned it into its greatest vulnerability. And the acceleration hasn't stopped. But there's another force at play that almost nobody is discussing. Digital yuan rise. While Western media was focused on Bitcoin and crypto speculation, China was quietly building something far more strategic. The digital yuan, also known as ECNY. It's a central bank digital currency designed for one purpose: to make international trade without the US dollar not just possible, but seamless. Think about what this means for oil trade. Right now, settling oil transactions requires correspondent banking through New York. Every dollar transaction, everywhere in the world, touches an American bank at some point. That gives Washington surveillance and control over global commerce. Control. The digital yuan bypasses all of that. Direct settlement between buyer and seller. No American banks involved. No SWIFT network needed. No ability for Washington to freeze or monitor the transaction. Invisible and unstoppable. China has already piloted cross-border digital yuan transactions with Thailand, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia through Project M-Bridge. The infrastructure to replace the dollar in oil trade already exists and is being tested. This isn't theoretical, it's operational. The digital yuan gives China's trading partners a complete off-ramp from the dollar system. And once that off-ramp is smooth enough, the traffic will flow. But what about America's response? Surely Washington isn't just watching this happen. America's gamble. Washington is not blind to what's happening, but its responses have been, let's say, counterproductive. America's strategy has three pillars: military presence in the Gulf, economic pressure on nations that stray from the dollar, and domestic energy production to reduce dependence on Saudi oil. The problem: each pillar is crumbling. Military presence in the Middle East is expensive and increasingly unpopular at home. After Iraq and Afghanistan, the American public has zero appetite for new Gulf commitments. And MBS knows it. A protector who won't fight isn't much of a protector. Economic pressure. We just discussed how sanctions backfired. Every threat pushes more nations toward BRICS. And domestic energy. Yes, America produces more oil than ever through fracking. But that doesn't solve the reserve currency problem. America doesn't need Saudi oil anymore, but it desperately needs Saudi Arabia to sell oil in dollars. That's the paradox. Energy independence should have been a triumph. Instead, it removed America's leverage over Riyadh. Saudi Arabia no longer needs American protection as desperately. America still needs Saudi cooperation for dollar dominance. Leverage lost forever. The power dynamic has flipped. And the consequences of that flip lead us to the most important question of all. What comes next? So what happens when the petrodollar finally collapses? Not if, when, because the trajectory is clear. The transition won't be overnight. It'll be a slow bleed. Then suddenly, a tipping point. 1. Dollar's share of reserves drops below 50%. 2. Major oil contracts shift to yuan and rupees. 3. US borrowing costs spike dramatically. 4. Inflation becomes structurally permanent. The American middle class, already squeezed by inflation, will face a cost of living crisis unlike anything since the 1970s. Imported goods become drastically more expensive. The government can no longer spend without real consequences. Social programs get slashed. Military budgets get questioned. The American empire was built on a currency privilege that is now being revoked by the rest of the world. But here's what they won't tell you on the news. This isn't destruction, it's rebalancing. The rest of the world has been subsidizing American consumption for 50 years. When the subsidy ends, America will have to live within its means like every other country. The question isn't whether this will happen. The question is whether you'll be prepared when it does. Let's connect the dots. In 1974, Kissinger built a system that turned the dollar into the world's indispensable currency. For 50 years, America printed, spent, and borrowed on the back of that system. But now Saudi Arabia is selling oil in yuan. China has built digital payment infrastructure that bypasses American banks entirely. BRICS is expanding into an economic bloc that rivals the G7. And every sanction America imposes pushes more nations toward the exit. Pattern recognized, truth exposed. The petrodollar didn't just give America cheap debt. It gave America the illusion that deficits don't matter, that wars can be funded on credit cards, that money can be printed forever without consequences. If you want to understand what's happening in the world, stop listening to what they say and start watching what they do. Watch what Saudi Arabia is doing. Watch what China is building. Watch what BRICS is planning. The pattern is unmistakable. The question is whether you'll see it before it's too late. If you made it this far, comment petrodollar dead if you see the pattern now. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about? The truth is out there. You just have to follow the money. Subscribe if you want to keep digging.